Councilmember, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So before we get into council a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about your background, because you are the most recent member to join City Council?
I am. So I'm a lifelong Northeast Philadelphian. I grew up in a little area called the Oxford Circle, and I went to St. Martin de Tours Grammar School, which at the time was the largest parochial grammar school in the world. And then I graduated and went to Cardinal Doherty High School, and I believe that was the largest Catholic high school at the time in the world. So I come from big parishes and big families. And then I went on to LaSalle College to get a teaching degree in English and secondary ed. And then I went on to the University of Pennsylvania to get a master's degree in government administration. Was lucky enough to serve in Governor Casey's administration as Deputy Secretary for General Services, which essentially was the business arm of state government. And then I returned to Philadelphia, my hometown, after 7.5 years with the governor, and I went into the private sector. And then about 10 years ago, I ran and won a term in the State House of Representatives, where I served for the last 8 years, and then got elected in May and took the oath of office in June of 2022 to assume my new responsibilities here in the city of Philadelphia.
So what are some of the major differences between serving in the State House and now serving the City Council?
Well, from a legislative standpoint, going from being in the minority to now being in the majority, my voice will be heard a lot more at the local level, just by virtue of controlling the legislature, for being the Democrats. The House of Representatives in Harrisburg is skewed very heavily in the Senate and in the House to the Republican Party. Well, the majority party, I should say, and the majority party controls the agenda. So we can only fight for a voice at the table, but by being where we are in the minority. And then we rely also on the Democratic governor to advance initiatives that we care about and or fight against bad stuff that the legislature enacts.
And as a new member, especially the way you came in, typically if it were a normal election year, the incoming council members would have some time to adjust, and there are people who come in and talk about different things. You were just sort of put right into your seat, and I saw your first council meeting. I thought he was just sworn in. What is that learning curve like when you're kind of doing it on the fly like that?
Larry, that's a great question, and I'll reference what Council President said during my swearing in. He said, "Why didn't you wait 2 more weeks until after this budget was over?" And it might have been easier, but that's not what we signed up for. We wanted the 6th Councilmatic to have a voice in this year's budget. I wanted to have my voice in weighing in on the reduction of the BERT tax, the reduction of the wage tax. I wanted to be part of sending a message to not only my district, but to the city and the business community as a whole, because I interacted quite a bit with the diverse chambers of commerce who were very much pushing for this agenda. And I wanted to make sure I was part of that voice. And while I was nervous, because again, we were meeting via Zoom or Teams, whatever we were on, and the bills were being called not necessarily in order, both in the committee as a whole and in our first council meeting and in our final council meeting where we enacted the budget. Tommy and I were working closely on making sure we understood what was before us and made sure we took the appropriate vote to make sure that we were accurately reflected on what was a difficult budget, but I think was a very good budget.
And regarding budget or really anything else that you've been working on just for the last couple of months, what have been your sort of early observations? What are some of the challenges you've seen? What are some of the opportunities you see?
So let's just talk about the opportunities I see. I have been a cheerleader in Harrisburg when I worked 8 years with Governor Casey and when I worked 8 years in the state legislature. And, you know, the rest of the state doesn't necessarily view us with the lens that perhaps the folks on this call do. They kind of see Philadelphia as the city of crime, you know, the city of gun violence, you know, wasting state taxpayers' resources, that sort of thing. And my job, I think, in the Casey administration was to paint a different picture of Philadelphia, that we're truly the birthplace of America. You know, we have wonderful manufacturing. We have a tourism and restaurant industry that's second to none if we do it right. And we're the economic engine for the state of Pennsylvania. And so now that I'm out of the state and I'm in the city, I think my job is to continue to be a cheerleader back up to Harrisburg and to the federal government that we're worthy of the resources we're asking for, and we're not going to squander them. I mean, I look at 2026 in Philadelphia as sort of the benchmark where I want to work every single day to make sure that when we're celebrating the 250th birthday party of America, that we've addressed the homeless issues, that we've addressed the gun violence, you know, that we have reshored jobs back to Pennsylvania and back, hopefully, to the city of Philadelphia to increase our tax base. And I want to be that cheerleader because people are looking to the elected leaders. There's only 17 of us on city council. When I was in Harrisburg, I was one of 253, 203 in the House, 50 in the Senate. So 17 people and the mayor, you know, are really the people that I think have to be out there and saying, we're open for business. You know, we've just reduced our taxes. What can we do to either bring you in or keep you here so that we have that tax base that does fund the schools and does fix the roads and does keep the lights on?
Can you tell us a little bit about your committee assignments, which ones you're most excited about, and sort of what maybe your goals are for those?
So I'm on about, what we got, Tom, 13 committees?
I think you're on 7. You're at 7.
7, okay. And we're not a chair yet of any of them. Although, as council president pointed out, there may be some vacancies in the next couple months, depending on who chooses to run for mayor. I'm going to go in as the freshman on those committees and try and figure them out and understand them a little bit before I, you know, try and insert myself. When I was in Harrisburg, I was the secretary of the Commerce Committee. You know, I was the often the acting chair of the Finance Committee. I was on the Insurance Committee, and I was on the Gaming Oversight. So I was sort of on the business committees of the state government. The ones we're on now, I think I'm gonna have to this summer, this August, and hopefully early September, get to understand them better and see where I can bring some of my experience to those committees, and obviously work with the committee chairs.
Yeah, and it takes time for, especially just coming into it now, to sort of get the lay of the land on that. When you had mentioned being on more business-oriented committees in Harrisburg, do you think that business development and those kinds of things are going to be one of your key focuses on council?
Oh, absolutely. So prior to going into the House, I was the vice president of business development for the Philadelphia Federal Credit Union. The Philadelphia Federal Credit Union is the non-uniform, well, it started in 1951 as the non-uniformed credit union for the city. And it has grown to 130,000 members, a couple $2 billion in assets. And, you know, I loved my job in bringing new members into that and providing small business loans to a diverse community in Philadelphia. Sometimes the banks aren't as, well, they have a profit motive, of course. Credit unions are not for profit. So we would use our money to invest back into our members. And that's where I see my role in city government. The people that are paying us the taxes, we ought to prudently reinvest in the resources to provide, jobs, quality education, and that sort of thing. So I'm very much interested in promoting economic development, but both in the 6th Councilmanic and in the city as a whole. Like in particular, Tom and I are working with a company right now that is interested in coming to the city. Only a couple of years ago, we worked with them to develop a site which is under construction right now in the Conshohocken area. I mean, listen to this. So they came to me and they want to re-onshore generic antibiotics. So 98% of the antibiotics that the United States used were from overseas. So you talk about homeland security. We were so vulnerable prior to COVID and now that we offshored all those jobs and all those manufacturing. So if the other governments decided at some point they weren't going to ship to America, they were just going to ship to other parts of the world, we would have been dying of all sorts of different diseases, hypertension, you name it, whatever we use these antibiotics for. We were very vulnerable. So it was important for us to hook that company up with the federal government. At the time, it was the end of the Trump administration, beginning of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration immediately saw a need for this and were very compelling and instrumental in helping us. But so they now will be open sometime this fall and creating lots of jobs in Conshohocken. They liked the way Tom and I did business with them. They now want to expand in the city of Philadelphia. So we want to tell that good story. And Tom used to be vice president of the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. So he gets how that all works. And when he met with them, first of all, we were a little shocked that they wanted to come into the city because of the challenges we have. But they also see us as a major port and at a great rail and shipping center. So it fits their business model. But they, like other companies, have the same concerns when they bring in their executive to downtown Philadelphia and they come out of their hotel and they have to step over a homeless person, or they're fearful of the gun violence. That's a challenge we have to overcome.
Okay, I'd like to bring Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you, Councilman, for taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure.
I guess my first question for you is, you're taking over a spot that was held by a councilman that had been in that position for a long time, which means you're dealing with a set of constituents that are used to going to him for certain things. I guess my first question for you is, what are you hearing from your new constituents about their priorities? What is it that they want to make sure that you take on?
So quality of life issues in my district are big. So right now, we have I don't know, I didn't even know what a boom party was until this past year, but there's sort of these random gatherings of lots of folks that are having these real loud parties, and they're finding different spots to gather, and it's loud music, it's littering, it's open containers in the out and drinking, it's the pot smoking, just general lawlessness. And of course, we struggle with the police department right now because they just don't have the resources to sort of follow the potential boom parties that are coming out. So Tom and I are trying to assemble what we're calling a quality of life enforcement task force. where we're going to ask the Attorney General, the Police Department, Labor and Industry, so what are some of the other ones?
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Recreation,
The Rangers.
the Park Rangers, so that we're all in real time communicating so that we can prevent sort of these things, or just ask them to be more peaceful. You know, if it just means lowering the music, being more discreet, taking your trash with you, that sort of thing, you know. But we're hearing from my constituents that the quality of life issues are a problem. The short dumping at the end of the block that litters, the house next door that doesn't clean up, doesn't bring their trash cans in, doesn't do those sort of things. So we're going to sort of, without, you know, being heavy-handed, we're going to try and just teach block by block some of like good practices, tidy homes, tidy blocks, tidy neighborhoods, you know, compliance with laws that are on the book, being respectful, and that sort of thing. So quality of life issues are big.
Now, what made you decide that you wanted to be in city council? Because you had to see, you know, kind of the relationship that people are having with council right now, and that, you know, a lot of folks are not necessarily happy with city council. What made you decide to take this on?
Well, that's a fair question, and it's not something that I took lightly. When the vacancy occurred, and some of the ward leaders in Northeast Philadelphia asked me if I would consider it, I actually asked for some time to reflect on it, because I knew it would impact my family because of the time that it would require. This is a 24/7 job. Not that my state rep job wasn't, but these are issues that are, and it's a much larger district than my state rep district. So, and I talked to my family about it, and I have 5 children. My youngest is in high school, last year of high school. And they said, Dad, you know, I think you can make a difference, and we would really be proud if you took on that new challenge. And then, of course, my wife, who hates politics, hates government, hates everything about all the jobs I've ever had, I think, she said, Mike, I think you should do this. And then I prayed about it. And when I talked to some of the folks that I could potentially assemble, including Tom, who had a great job, and he said he would come on and join me and do it, I said, you know what? Let's give it a shot.
Now, having been a state rep in Harrisburg, particularly as a Democrat, that had to be an extremely frustrating experience. Do you think that this is going to be less frustrating, more frustrating, or just a different type of frustrating?
Whoa, maybe a little of all 3 of those. You know, we're going to set the bar high, so I'm sure not all our initiatives will be successful, so I'll be frustrated. But going from the minority to the majority is going to make a world of difference in terms of being heard and advancing legislation and initiatives, because it was so difficult on the state level to get anything past the majority party, that just having an ear in the majority party in the city, I think is going to make a big difference. Having said that, and I'll brag here, I have several laws that were passed over the last 8 years because I was able to navigate a little bit of the middle of the road, and I was able to position some legislation that I would explain to the majority party. You know, it was just common sense, good things that ought to benefit the 12 million people we all represented. And so I feel proud that I was able to have that kind of dialogue. But I can also tell you, I had gun legislation that was common sense that they wouldn't even look at. I've reintroduced it every time I got elected. And I'm talking about getting ghost guns off the street. I'm not talking about restricting the Second Amendment. I'm not talking about, you know, all the things that they espouse. I'm just talking about common sense gun legislation that would have protected the city of Philadelphia, to the extent where we even said, look, if you want to make all your laws in the other 66 counties, just give the city of Philadelphia the ability to make our own gun laws. And all you had to do was say the word gun and you were dismissed.
Now, what do you think you bring to the current council in terms of dealing with Harrisburg, in terms of lessons or advice that the current council doesn't currently have? And how do you think that can best be used to help Philadelphia maybe have a better relationship with Harrisburg?
Well, we did have a good relationship with city council, believe it or not. We Sherelle Parker was my colleague many years ago in the state house, and she understands the way Harrisburg works. And we had a liaison put in place a couple of years ago from Council President Clark, where we were able to communicate the state dollars we thought we had available, and then we would get the initiatives from Council President Clark. And we always tried to meet regularly to make sure the city's wishes and our ability to hopefully grant those wishes were met. But having said that, my former colleagues of a month and a half ago, I have a wonderful relationship with, and I intend to use that relationship to advance whatever initiatives that we see that we need from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because there's a ton of money up there that the majority party will not let us spend. Their game plan right now, as I see it anyhow, is they want to win the governor's race. And then if they do, and they control the House and they control the Senate and they control the governor's office, then all of a sudden I think they're going to have the will to spend that money.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you so much, Councilman, and congratulations on your new, slightly less frustrating gig. And I'm going to
I didn't admit to that.
and I'm going to turn it over to Larry McLean, my co-host. Do you have any other questions, Larry?
Yeah, I have one last question, and maybe it's a little too early to ask this. But with City Council's fall session about 6 weeks away, do you have any thoughts on any legislative goals for this upcoming session?
It's a little early for that. We're batting some things around that, but we want to make sure we understand what's already in committees. Like, we haven't analyzed what's already been introduced. And then I'm still, believe it or not, trying to finish legislation that we've had introduced in Harrisburg. So I just share one that would impact the city of Philadelphia. A group called the Friends of Pennypack Park came into my office a couple of years ago, and they were about to disband. Well, they did disband their organization. They're essentially a group of volunteers that on weekends and holidays go to our city parks, in particular Pennypack Park, and they clean up. Well, the liability insurance from frivolous lawsuits were prohibiting them to raise enough money to pay the premiums and the insurance to protect them. And they were getting sued individually. So we authored legislation to amend the Recreational and Land Use Act that will mitigate frivolous lawsuits and give less liability on to the Friends of group, only like gross negligence, not, they'll be immune to somebody that might just fall over a trash bag that a volunteer put in the wrong spot. You know what I'm saying? The good news is we got it through the tourism committee unanimously. It passed the House of Representatives unanimously. It came out of the Senate Tourism Committee unanimously, and it is sitting teed up for when the state Senate goes back in September. If the state Senate does the right thing and passes that, Governor Wolf already told us he's going to sign it. And hopefully this fall, we're going to get Friends of groups reorganized and back out volunteering in our parks, not only in Philadelphia, but statewide.
Well, it's hard. It's always difficult to hear that volunteer groups have those kinds of problems. You know, people who just want to do something in their community. So it's good to hear that something's being done about it. Councilmember Driscoll, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, and have a safe trip. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. God bless.